Hey guys, it's been a while since I was able to make a Game Hammer video for a variety of reasons, but I thought I'd come back and start making some of the extras before we get back to the main Game Hammer, because that's going to take a bit of a while basically to set up scenes and all of that. So we thought we'd come in with a quick video that's kind of a look at a bulk review. I want to do an entire collection in one video, and to see whether it's possible to do that effectively and not just make something that's a bit of a mess. I'm hoping it won't be. We're trying something out. We're going to do a collection, and because it's the first one, we're going to do a Mega Drive collection. I don't have a huge amount of Mega Drive games, so let's do a bulk review, all of them in one video, so we get to look at the size of the collection, it's not very big, and also get an opinion on some pretty good games. Well, some of them are good, some of them not so good. Speaking of that, let's get started. Okay, why do I own these? Well, it's a fairly simple reason. I like games. These ones aren't well regarded, but they're still games, and apparently there is some fun to be had with them, and I wanted to see what that fun was. So I picked up Bubsy, and because it was there, I picked up Bubsy 2. So, let's have a look at them. Okay, let's start with the good points. Bubsy is a bright, well-animated game. The music's not too bad. I actually kind of enjoy it, but there are a lot of significant problems with the game. First and foremost, it's trying desperately to be Sonic the Hedgehog in a world that already has Sonic the Hedgehog. So it's like you can't get away from the fact that it is desperately unimaginative. Also, some of the death animations, and you'll see them a lot, are far too long. The one where he gets knocked on the head and then melts. I'm not even sure what's going on there. He's not supposed to melt when you get knocked out. Surely he should fall over. He has a fall over animation. I've seen it. I've seen it several times. Some of them are quite imaginative. I don't mind the one where he gets stuck in a car. That's quite funny. It's quite imaginative, and I enjoyed that. But the problem is you'll see them all the time because the levels aren't well designed. A lot of the layouts have the serious problem that a lot of platformers from the time had, where it's just got enemies in places where it shouldn't have enemies. It's trying to make a fast-paced platformer, and great, it has a lot of the speed. I kind of like a lot of the speed, but the enemies stop you in the same way that some of the bad Sonic games just have enemies where you have to have lightning reflexes or have memorized the levels to be able to progress. This has the same thing. So you're running along really fast and bam, you're dead. You had no warning, and that's a big issue. So there are some severe downsides. A lot of the level just feels like it's too long and that it's padded out, and then you have enemies that are in the wrong place, and as a result, it's not fun to play. It could have been good. There's a lot of good stuff in it, and I really do like what I like. I like it a lot, but the bad parts outweigh the good, and as a result, it's not that great a game. The second game solves an awful lot of the problems of the first. The levels feel a little bit better designed. It feels an awful lot more like James Pond, for example. I enjoy this one a lot more than the first game, in the same way that I enjoyed James Pond 2 a lot more than the first James Pond. The graphics are still great, the sound is jolly, the animations seem to have been pulled back a little bit, and it's faster paced, better designed. Altogether, it's a better game. I actually quite enjoy this one. It's not as good as Sonic, which is still trying to emulate, but it's on the level of something like James Pond or a traditional, proper platformer from the old school. So this one is worth having a look at if you're interested in your old-style platformers. All in all, the Bubsy games have a bad reputation, and to be honest with you, it's quite deserved. The first game, it has a lot of flaws. It has some good points, but it has a lot of flaws. The second, it's an awful lot better, it's more polished, and knew better what they were doing with the Bubsy idea. It's still not brilliant, but it's well worth having a quick check if you get the chance. At the time of its release, Corporation was a game like no other. I'd never seen anything like this. Okay, sure, I'd seen some role-playing games that kind of give you a 3D or fake 3D perspective, but nothing like this. You could move freely, you could go diagonally, you could shoot at things in real time rather than pressing buttons like in an RPG. It was amazing. When you look back on it now, it's doing something very similar to how Wolfenstein 3D worked. It's basically not 3D. At its core, it's not 3D. It's basically just projection maps of a 2D environment. And yeah, perfectly fine to do that. It works well, it looks great, the music's great, it's very atmospheric, and it's actually really easy to get into and play. This is a game that, if you like the early days of 3D gaming, especially FPSs and the old dungeon crawler or that kind of thing, I think you might find something that you like in Corporation. Give it a try. Now here's a fun one for you. I actually have no idea where I got this game from. It's Davis Cup World Tour, and as you can see, it's really, really nice. It's bright, sounds great, doesn't play too well, however. There's a weird timing fault where you have to try and hit the ball at a point where it doesn't look like you should be able to hit it if you want to actually manage to knock it back to the other player. But it looks great, it's responsive, and I still have no idea where I got it from. I think it came in a bundle when I bought Streets of Rage, but I'm not entirely sure. It's just been in my collection for years. Sadly, the cartridge doesn't seem to work anymore. I've cleaned it, I've opened it, it doesn't seem to want to do anything. I'll try again, but at some point. But you've seen this footage because I got it off an emulator, which is why it's brighter and clearer compared to the rest of the footage in this video. However, if you get a chance to play Davis Cup, I think it's actually worth giving it a try, seeing whether it works for you. I like the chunky sprites, I like the sound effects, I'm not too keen on the gameplay, but your mileage may vary. If you ever played Choplifter back in the Atari 2600 days and thought, this needs something a little bit extra, then Desert Strike is the game for you. This game is fantastic. Everyone that I knew back in the day played it. Didn't matter how old you were, who you were, you played this game. The basic game mechanics are pretty simple. You fly a helicopter and you have 3 weapons. You have great rockets, not so great rockets, and a machine gun. You have to rescue missing in action soldiers. You have to blow up certain things for your mission, like aircraft bases, radio towers, things like that. And you have to try and avoid getting killed in the process. It's very simple, but the mechanics are amazing for the time. It looks brilliant. Even now, it looks brilliant. It's all sprite work. It's not proper 3D. It's just sprites. But even so, it has a great look and feel to it, and I cannot recommend it enough. There are sequels. They're pretty good too. I particularly like the ones on the Saturn. They're fantastic, but Desert Strike, the original, is still the best. And to be honest with you, get the Mega Drive version over the others because it just looks better and handles better. What else can I say about this game? It has so much personality. There's so much to do. You can do it in any order. It's non-linear. It gives you proper freedom. It feels big. It feels open. And it just feels great to play. Can't recommend it enough. The 90s were a weird time where you had to have a mascot and you had to make a platformer if you wanted to be anyone in games. So, obviously, at some point someone's going to come along and turn that on its head. Enter Earthworm Jim. This is a weird game that takes the idea of the mascot platformer and basically says, no, we're not going to have our edgy with attitude but really cute and cuddly looking guy. We're going to have an earthworm in a spacesuit that's not even his, he's just found it, and we're going to launch cows into the air, shoot people who've got monkeys for heads, have a giant monster queen that you have to attack that's basically just a giant wasp, and all of our really weird enemies are going to have so much personality that they could have been our mascot for our platformer if we wanted to. But no, we're going to have an earthworm in a spacesuit that attacks enemies with his own head. It's out of this world. It's weird. It's crazy. It's amazing. Every level has its own distinct look and feel. Every level feels very, very much like it could have been a game in its own right. Everything oozes proper polish and just a love for gaming and for weird, wacky 90s style zany humor. This game is fantastic. Get the Mega CD version if you can, because it has a little bit extra and the soundtrack is just amazing. But if you can't, if you don't have a Mega CD or you can't find that game, the Mega Drive original is superb. I loved it back in the day. We played it all the time, my friends and I. Finally got to the end after months and months of intense play, and loved it so much we started again. This game is one of those that goes, yeah, we're going to do this our way, and you're going to love us for it. And you know what? They were right. It is brilliant. I cannot recommend it enough. I love it still to this day. I still can't get the grips with certain parts of it. As you can see here, I need an awful lot more practice because I am so out of practice from back in the day. But even so, I love it anyway. And yeah, just get this game. Get it, play it, love it. Echo the Dolphin is one of those games that I never really understood as a child. A few of my friends played it. We all hired it from the local video store and we played it. And I never really got to grips with it. But recently, Slope's Game Room, link in the description, had a complete history on Echo the Dolphin, and he kind of rekindled my interest in it. So I decided to pick up a copy and see whether I could get to grips with this odd game. And you know what? I kind of did. It's very interesting. It looks beautiful. It plays really quite nicely. And yeah, I really still don't quite get it, but I enjoyed the time I had with the game. So I'm going to give it another try, see just what I can manage with it, and see what happens, because obviously there's something here. I can kind of understand it now. I couldn't as a child. It just didn't click with me, but it kind of does now. So I'm going to give it another try. But for the most part, I think it is quite an interesting game. Certainly visually, it's very different to what was coming out at the time from Sega. And yeah, it just seems nice. So I'm going to have another try with it and see how I go. And that's all I can say on this one. Sticking with the theme of games that I didn't get to play when I was a kid, here's Fantastic Dizzy. I adored Dizzy on the 8-bit systems. I first played him on the Spectrum and Treasure Island Dizzy, then got Fantasy World Dizzy on the CPC, then got all of the Dizzys that I could get hold of. Aside from Crystal Kingdom, I never got that game. But Fantastic Dizzy is one that I heard about and read about in magazines, but never saw for sale, never saw for rent, never got to play until very recently. And you know what? I've been missing out. This game is brilliant. It feels an awful lot like it's a straight Amiga port, and it feels an awful lot like a lot of the influences are coming from the earlier Dizzy games, so it's kind of a greatest hits type of experience. But it is a game in its own right. It's got a plot and it's really good fun, and it looks fantastic. As Dizzy games go, this is one of the good ones. There are a few of the later Dizzy adventures that just don't quite cut it, but this one is so good. I love it. I'm going to do a proper full review of it at some point, because it is next up on my Dizzy list, so yeah, we're going to have to see more of this. But in the meantime, if you see a copy, get it, play it. I think you'll like it if you're into the old style graphic adventures. In the 90s, there was this phase where you had to play a game as if you were playing a movie, and no game really got that down pat as much as Delphine Software's Flashback. Flashback is one of those games where you don't so much play it as experience it, and it will stick with you. If you're a fan of science fiction or of the Prince and Persia games, basically, if you're a fan of action platformers with puzzle elements, you will love Flashback. And also, if you're a fan of science fiction in general, you will love Flashback. This is basically a homage to all of those sci-fi action films and stories from the 80s, and it wears that on its sleeve. It is an amazing game. The puzzles aren't too bad. It's got a lot of good points to it. The animation is phenomenal. When I first saw this, my jaw dropped as a kid because I'd never seen anything that played like Flashback. I borrowed it from a friend. He had a copy, and I think it took me 2 weeks to finish it because I just played it intensively. It's one of those games that when you try it, you will either love it or think, wow, I didn't think games were quite like that, especially not back in the 90s. So I was one of those that was just overawed by it, to the point where eventually I managed to get a copy for myself and played it again, and it's still as good now as it was then. There are some problems with the game, like sometimes you have to be pixel perfect for the jumps, but even despite that, when I played it again, it's like, no, I remember this perfectly because it was such a good game. Speaking of good games, here's Gods by the famous Bitmap brothers. If you're from the 16-bit era, especially if you're on the Amiga, you know who the Bitmap brothers were, and you know that that name was a seal of quality. This game, Gods, it's indescribable. It's amazing. I loved it so much the first time I saw it. I rented it from a video shop near my house and didn't want to take it back because I had to. But I didn't want it because it was so good and I just wanted one more go. Like, come on, just give me one more try. I'm good for it, you know? It's that kind of addictive quality to it. Eventually I got a copy on the PC, and it's good. The PC version is pretty damn good, but it's nothing compared to the Mega Drive version, which just feels so good, so fluid. The controller feels perfect for the game, and it's just amazing. It's hard as nails, however. Don't expect to get through this very quickly. Don't expect to get through this within a week or two of getting it, because it is that hard. There's secret areas, there's all kinds of problems. All the bad guys come out at certain times when you reach certain spots on the screen, so you have to learn what's going to go on when you're doing certain things. It's just so good. It rewards multiple playthroughs to get it just down right. Look at it though. Looks great, sounds great, plays great. There is no part of this game that is bad. I love it so much, I can't recommend it enough. Now let's move on to something that is very different to what we've been looking at so far. Here's Bomberman, well, Mega Bomberman on the Mega Drive, and it's brilliant. It's one of those proper arcadey puzzle games. You know Bomberman. If you haven't seen Bomberman by now, I don't know where you've been. It's brilliant though. Look at the presentation. It's graphically fantastic. It's got a very cartoony feel to it, but that doesn't detract from the gameplay. It looks great. It plays so well. Everything's so smooth. It's just amazingly brilliant. The puzzle elements are great. It has a multiplayer mode, but it's also got a story mode, kind of, where you're trying to get parts of some discs. I can't actually remember what you're supposed to be doing or what the storyline is, but you go through the game, you solve all the puzzles, you get parts of a disc, it aligns up, and then you go on and do it again. It's pretty much just Bomberman. Any excuse to play Bomberman is good in my book, but it looks brilliant, it sounds brilliant, it plays brilliant. I can't recommend it enough. If you like Bomberman, give this one a try. It's fantastic. Okay, next up is something that's slightly different to the others because it's actually 3 games in one. We've got the Mega Games Pack 2 with Revenge of the Shinobi, Streets of Rage, and Golden Axe. Brilliant set of games, all of them pretty much using the same engine if I remember correctly, which is probably how they're managing to get all 3 of them onto one cartridge. You select them, whichever one you want, from a menu which you can only access by turning the Mega Drive off and then on again. I tried pressing restart to get back to this menu and it just doesn't work, which is an oddity, but we'll take what we've got. Let's have a look at Revenge of Shinobi first. Anyone who knows about Shinobi knows that this game is one of the greatest Shinobi games, and actually it's pretty damn good as a game on its own. I love it. I find it very, very difficult to play because I'm not great at this kind of game, but I do adore playing them. They're a lot of fun. I think this one is graphically quite special. I mean, look at it. It looks pretty damn good. It's not your typical game from the era that I would have gone for. It looks more realistic. I prefer a cartoony look, but this looks great, and it plays pretty damn well too. Not so keen on these armored samurai, but what can you do? It's one of those things. Armored bad guys are always a bit annoying, but it's your standard action platformer, so if you like action platformers, I think you'll like this one too. Let's move straight back to the menu now after having a look at that and check out Streets of Rage. This is a game that I used to play an awful lot with my friends because they had a copy, and we would play for hours on end. I used to play as Blaze, as my main character, and everyone used to say, "Why do you always pick her?" And my response was always, "Why are you asking? Look at her." She was a brilliant character, fast, good range of moves, and just brilliant to play as. You could always tell where she was on the screen. The other guys, they kind of blend in with some of the enemies, but this girl doesn't. So, it's like Revenge of Shinobi. It's a standard side-scrolling beat-em-up. It's a little different though in that it doesn't have multiple levels. It's just pretty much just flat. You walk along, beat everyone up, and then walk on a little bit more. But it has so much character to it. It looks good, and the music, the soundtrack, is amazing. So I'm not going to talk too much about it because I'm going to come back to it later on in this video. So let's move on straight away, because our third game is the one that I actually bought this game for. Golden Axe is phenomenal. I know Streets of Rage is the one that everyone loves, and yeah, I love it too. We'll talk about it a bit more later, but Golden Axe is why I bought Mega Games 2. It's a brilliant game. It's your standard, let's have a Conan guy and a Valkyrie woman and a dwarf, and let's have them just kick some ass in a pseudo-medieval fantasy-style setting. It's brilliant. It's cathartic, fun, very much like Streets of Rage, very different to Revenge of Shinobi now. I'm thinking about it in terms of gameplay style. It does have the shared thing of multiple levels that you can walk around on, but at the same time, it's more like Streets of Rage, only in a fantasy setting, because your main goal is to beat everyone up with a variety of weapons, depending on whether you're on a vehicle or not. But for the most part, you're going to be beating people up. And yeah, I don't know what to say. It's great. Play it because it's so much fun. And here's the thing, a lot of these games got remade for later consoles, like the PlayStation 2 has a version of Golden Axe. It's completely different to this version. So always check out the Mega Drive version of Golden Axe because it's so different to the remade one on the PlayStation 2, which has a more 3D style to it. It's like 2.5D. So go for the original. The remake is pretty good and it adds some interesting cutscenes, but the Mega Drive one is where it's at. Always go for the originals. When I moved away from gaming on the Mega Drive, I still had a Mega Drive accessible because I had a Mega PC. But I got into games like Civilization, and as a result, I found Megalomania quite compelling. It's one of those games that you wouldn't expect to come out on a console because you always get taught, well, God games and real-time strategy, they don't really work on console. You need a mouse and keyboard, and to a certain extent, that's true. But Megalomania manages to make it work. And it manages to make it work on a console that has 3 buttons and a directional control, so that is quite impressive. The game is fairly simple. You need to research technology and use it to conquer an island, or a specific space on an island. And as a result, it's very simple, it's very streamlined, but it works so effectively. The game is an oddity. I'm really out of practice, as you can see from this little bit of footage. I'm not doing it too well, but what I'm doing is basically showing you it's slow, it's quite thoughtful in how it works, so you're not having to react really quickly, which is great for this kind of game because even if you don't have a mouse and keyboard and access to all of your little control macros or whatever, it's very hard to react as quickly as you normally would. So slow down the game, make it a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more paced, and it works so well. It's been a long time since I played it properly. I used to be able to play it really effectively and get quite far in the game. Nowadays, not so much. I'm going to have to practice a bit more. I think I'm going to have to come back to this one and do a proper review because I love it so much. But I recommend, if you're into that kind of God game or strategy or RTS, that kind of thing, give Megalomania a try. I think you'll be impressed. Now let's move over to a game that doesn't require you to be into anything in order to be impressed. It's Micro Machines 2 Turbo Tournament. This game is phenomenal. You can see here it's a J-cart, which means you don't need an expansion block for the Mega Drive in order to play 4-player. You can do it straight from the cartridge. I love that about Codemasters. Always innovating in nice ways with their little cartridges. It's brilliant. The game is fast-paced, very, very simple to play. You have directional controls, you have an accelerator, a brake, and a horn. You don't need the horn, it's just they had an extra button left, so they added a horn. It's such a simple game. As you can see from this, the entire thing is about racing tiny cars around desks and other locations in a house, basically. It's kids playing racing with their little toys, essentially. But it's so much fun. I can come back to this and play it for hours at a time and enjoy every second of it. It's difficult at times. Some of the controls are a little bit, let's say, a little bit quick to respond. You can easily fall off the course, but part of that is part of the charm. It's such a fun game. 4 players, 3 players, 2 players, even playing by yourself. It's always good fun. It's nice, it's bright, it's cartoony, which is the kind of game that I like on 16-bit systems because it works so well with them. It looks great, it plays great. I don't know how much more I could say about it. It is just brilliant. Go and try it. In fact, I liked Micro Machines 2 so much, I also have Turbo Tournament 96. I can't remember whether that's a sequel or a prequel or just a remake. I can't remember which. But anyway, that you look at it, it is brilliant fun. The courses are different in this one. It's also got a construction engine, if I remember correctly. You can build your own courses, which is always fun. But it's got the same wonderful, smooth, quick-to-respond gameplay with a lot of brilliant character to it. The courses are different, the cars are different to a certain extent, and it is such a fun game. Whether you go for this or you go for Turbo Tournament Micro Machines 2, Either way, you're going to have a lot of fun. I certainly did. I didn't want to stop playing when I was getting footage to record this video. So that's the kind of game it is. You just want one more turn every single time. Just one more turn. And I think that is the sign of an excellent game. From one excellent game to another, NBA Jam Tournament Edition. Mine's a bit of an oddity because, as you can see here, I have the Blue Label Mega Drive box for the PAL region, but my game and manual are both Red Label Genesis. It's one of those Genesis games that actually works on a European Mega Drive without a problem. I don't know why I've got it, it's just how it was when I bought it. But here you are, big, bold graphics, excellent gameplay. It's a 2-on-2 basketball pickup game, essentially, but it's trying to portray a proper basketball match. Got various options. You can have exhibition matches, tournaments, stuff like that. I used to play it endlessly 2-player with my friends because it was so good fun, and we just loved it so much. It takes a few liberties with basketball, for example, it's 2-on-2 player here, but also at certain points, if you get enough points in a row, your character will be on fire and the ball will turn to flame. There are also, there you are, the ball's turned to flame. There are also unlockable characters and all sorts. It's a really good, really well-made basketball game, and it's so much fun. If you put in the time to get to know it properly, you'll have a great time with it and be able to beat pretty much every team on the entire game, which is great. It's one of those games that actually rewards patience and practice, but even if you're just picking it up for half an hour or even 5 minutes of gameplay, you'll find something fun here to play. I love my basketball, but even those people that don't like basketball too much like NBA Jam because it's fun, it's easy to pick up, it's easy to understand, and it's great. We're going to stick with the theme of great sports games with NHLPA Hockey 93. Now, I was a big hockey fan right from childhood. I adore the sport, but I'd never played a game that felt like a game of hockey before until I met this one. On my Amstrad, I had a few old hockey games, and they were fun. We played them a lot, but they didn't feel immersive and they didn't feel like hockey. NHLPA 93 does. This is such a good game. And I know of people often say it's EA Sports Hockey 93-94 is usually the one that they always say is perfect. And yes, it is. But this one is where all of the game mechanics start come together. And they refined it later on, but this is where it all started to stick together as a brilliant idea. You can see you've got the standard vertical view of the court. You've got all of your players, well, most of the players, and you've got all of the gameplay elements. It is superb. I can't get enough of this game. If I sat down to play it now, I'd still be here in an hour or two's time because it's so much fun. Various modes again, you can do an entire season. You can have just a one-on-one challenge. You can play 2-player. It's got everything that you could want. And also, it's just about the hockey. There's no extras, there's no little flashy bits that you don't need, like a lot of other games from later on, like the modern ones, try to shoehorn in. This is just hockey, pure and simple, and I love it for it. I'm not the biggest fan of golf, not by quite a long shot. I like a game of Tiger Woods golf. I especially like it on the Wii when you can swing the Wii remote, and I know a lot of people are now going, oh, you're a Wii gamer, but yeah, the Wii has some very good games. And to be honest with you, I picked this one up because I found it in a shop just randomly and thought, no, I think I'll grab that and add it to my collection. It's actually quite a good golf game. I'm very surprised by how easy it is to play. It's got the standard controls. You can get an overview of the entire course. You can aim and you can select how strongly you hit or how weakly you hit the ball. And you've got to get the timing just right on this. Your swing and your timing has to be right, has to be pixel perfect, otherwise you will swing wildly off to the left or right depending on how far away from that central point on the power meter you get, which means that this is a game of skill and reflexes. Not the same as normal golf, but still very fun indeed. It actually looks pretty good, it's well presented, it sounds good, it feels good to play, and I was actually really surprised by how much I enjoyed playing it. So actually, if you're a sports fan, especially if you're a golf fan, you might find this one worth having a look at. What can I say that hasn't already been said about the Sonic the Hedgehog games? these are the games that made me want a Mega Drive back in the 90s. I had friends who had them, and we used to play them all the time. We could never finish the games. In fact, I didn't finish the original Sonic the Hedgehog for over a year after getting my own Mega Drive. Well, not Mega Drive, Mega PC, Amstrad Mega PC. It was a Mega Drive and a PC, and to be honest with you, it's what took me out of console gaming. I'd only been in briefly because I've been a computer gamer before that, and back straight into computer gaming via the PC. It's one of those things. It's funny how life throws things at you that way. But let's stop rambling and have a look at the games. Sonic the Hedgehog, the original. It is amazing. It's still as good now as it was back then, and now I think most people would agree with that. It's bright, it's colourful, it's really easy to get into. I mean, all the controls come down to press one button plus a direction, and it is so enjoyable. It's one of the best games I played back in the day, and it's still a firm favourite now. So, the music's great, the level design is pretty damn good. There were only a couple where I really had a problem, and some of them, like Labyrinth Zone, it wasn't great, but you get past it. You get past it pretty quick, in fact, and you get back into the game, and it's enjoyable. All of the level bosses are brilliant, fighting Robotnik in his different guises. It's all amazing. And I think, to be honest with you, everyone that plays it is probably going to have a pretty good time. But if you didn't like Sonic 1, and some people may not have, you probably liked Sonic 2. It's a refinement of everything that was good with the original. It is fast-paced, faster in the PAL regions than the original one. Although, to be honest with you, I think it was faster everywhere, but I'm not entirely sure. But definitely faster in PAL regions, which is where I am, than the original game was, because they managed to speed it up a bit. Still not as fast as the 60Hz refresh rate areas like Japan and America, but still really good even if you are stuck on 50Hz. It is brilliant. It's got an extra player mode, which is weird, and it's one of those ones that uses the odd shrink and double up effect that one of the Mega Drive's less used graphical modes can manage, which is why when you do two-player, it looks weird and shrunk and kind of not quite right. It's because of an odd graphical mode that you can use on the Mega Drive, which is probably why most people don't use it, because it looks odd. However, it's also one of those where Tails will just tag along if you fancy, and it's pretty good that way because he'll help you out. It doesn't really get in the way, which is great because you don't want an NPC companion that gets in the way. And all over, it is just such a good game. It takes everything that was good from the original and makes it even better. There are still some annoying levels, and most of the time they're near the end of the game now, so that's pretty good. For the most part, you won't have a bad time with this one. I love it. I love the music. In fact, some of the music in this game is amazing, to the point where it's not just some of the best computer game music ever, it's some of the best music, full stop. So, I really like this one. It's probably my favourite Mega Drive game ever, and that is saying something. Okay, earlier on I said that I would talk about Streets of Rage again, and the reason for that is that I have a separate copy from the Mega Games collection. And that's just because I got Mega Games a lot later than I got Streets of Rage. This is a game that I played to death as a kid, and it was great. I'm showing you here a different character to what I would normally play. I normally play as Blaze because I like her style, but this is Axel. And the reason I wanted to show you Axel instead of Blaze on this particular run-through is because Streets of Rage, despite being a standard beat-em-up where you basically just walk along and punch people and walk along, has different characters with different styles, which means that the game feels a little bit different if you play it with different characters. Each one has their own way of working, their different strengths and weaknesses, and as a result, you have to change your strategy a little bit in order to progress the game using specific characters. So that's good. It has a bit of replayability over and above just being a fun game to play. There's a huge amount of change in the locations that you're going through. It's got different sets. It's got a lot of different bad guys. So a lot of them repeat themselves, of course they do. But it's a great game for visually being different on each area. And also, above and beyond everything else, the soundtrack is wonderful. There's so much going for this game. I mean, look at it. This looks amazing. For a Mega Drive game in 16-bit era, it really did impress with the visuals. Also with the gameplay style. It's fluid. It's always responsive. It never feels like it's taxing the machine too much, although clearly it is working the machine quite hard because this thing looks great. And over and above everything else, it's such a fun game to play. Come along for another work through. It doesn't take too long to complete the entire thing. or just play for 5 minutes to distract yourself before you do something else. It's got something for everyone. I love it. I think if you like beat 'em up games, you'll love it too. Okay, let's move on to one that I seem to have played to death as a child, but never managed to get to the end. Funnily enough, it's one of those that isn't properly compatible with the Amstrad Mega PC. This one crashes after level 3 or 4, and sometimes earlier. It's an oddity, but T2 Terminator 2 Judgment Day is an odd game. It's one of those that I'm pretty sure the Angry Video Nerd has talked about a fair amount on his Arnold Schwarzenegger videos, where he doesn't like it, and I can see why. It's a very difficult to control game. Visually, it's wonderful. It looks pretty good. You know exactly who all the characters are. The locations look pretty good. I could have done with the sprites being a bit bigger, but, you know, there's like half of the screen not really used here. But then again, all your status stuff comes up at the top of the screen, so it kind of keeps that out of the way if you think about it. So maybe I can give it that with all of the real estate being unobtrusive. But even so, it feels like you're only using half the screen while you play. It's an odd game. Things don't quite sit quite right with it. It feels like it should have had a bit more polish, a bit more playtesting, that kind of thing. But at the same time, I enjoyed playing it when I was a kid. I loved Terminator 2 back when I was young. Probably too young to have actually watched it. Now I'm thinking about it. Oh well. But it's one of those things. Arnold Schwarzenegger looks pretty good as a character there. All of the areas, you know where they are. They're all taken straight from the film. It kind of follows the storyline of the film, but it has its own little extras. And it's just an odd game because it could be great. It could be lots of fun to play, but it's just a little bit unresponsive at times, and the controls are a little bit fiddly here and there, which means that you really, really have to practice and want to get good at this thing before you can get through it. Aside from that, I had a lot of fun playing it. Speaking of games you have a lot of fun playing, here's Worms. Now, if you've played it on the PC or the Amiga, you know exactly what you're looking at here. Worms is one of those oddities of gaming. You play with a friend and try to kill each other. You have a set of worms with weird weapons, and you have to use those weapons to attack each other and kill each other. It looks a little bit like Lemmings, only really violent, and it's so much fun. It's a party game, basically. A violent, weird party game, but really easy to get to grips with, which is exactly what you want in that kind of game. The Mega Drive is actually surprisingly well suited to Worms. I was expecting this to be a very fiddly game when I got it. I thought it wasn't going to work too well, but it works perfectly. It's just responsive, it's colourful, it's bright. You know exactly what's going on, even though everything is a little bit small on the screen. You know exactly what you're doing, where everything is. It works so well, and because it's on Mega Drive, you just plug it in, hand the control around, and everyone can have a good time. I love it. It's great fun. Go and get a copy. It's not too expensive either, and it seems to have been pretty popular, so it should be fairly easy to find. And what more can I say? It's great fun. It works perfectly. Go and try it. Our final game for this video is not so much a game as a tech demo, essentially. It's Zool, the Ninja of the Nth Dimension. And I do mean literally that it feels like a tech demo. It feels like you're playing one of those old scrolling demos from the Amiga days. Look at this. Look at that intro. That is just weird. And every part of the game feels a little bit like that. It's in your face. It's bright. It's overwhelming at times. But it's fun at the same time. See those Chupa Chup logos in the background? The entire game is sponsored by a very, very sugary sweet company. So it feels like you're on a sugar rush for the entire game. It has that oddness to it that you had to have in the 90s in order to be successful, and this really was successful. Every computer or console that came out on it seemed to have dominated. It's one of those games that everyone had, everyone played. I don't remember everyone loving it. I don't remember everyone finishing it, but everyone had it, everyone played it, and everyone was amazed by just how bright, colourful, and just intense the graphics were. The gameplay's not too bad. Once you get going and once you get used to it, once you get over the overwhelming mind-bendingness of it, it's actually a lot of fun to play. It's really difficult. It's one of those games that looks really childish, but is actually rock hard. So don't expect to get through this in one sitting just the moment that you plug it in. It's going to take a bit of effort. You're going to have to fight it, and then it will let you win eventually. But it is one of those games that is a challenge despite its appearance. I really love it. I'm a bit sad that the third installment turned out to be Ninja Bread Man, which is just one of those things. Thanks again to Guru Larry for that particular tidbit on one of his videos. link in the description, but look at it. It's intense, it's amazing. If you're into your rock-hard platformers, then give this a try. If you're not, it might be one to avoid because it will frustrate you immensely if you're not into that kind of game. But if you are, it's well worth giving it a try. Okay, as I said, it wasn't a huge collection. That's why I wanted to do this as a test for the first episode and see how we could do this. So I hope you did enjoy this look at the collection. And if you did, remember to click that like button, share it with your friends so that they can see some good games and some not so good games too. And do subscribe for future videos because there will be more in the future. But until next time, I've been Zoe Kirk-Robinson. You've been watching Game Hammer Extra on the Knob Mouse channel, and I'll see you later.